Matt Barberi sitting down here is more on the technical side of what we do, and when it comes to questions, if he can't answer it, we won't be able to answer it. I got to be quite honest. I mean, all of the size of the group and the fact that you're all engineers, you're probably going to be way above my head technically. I didn't really come here to do a technical. This is how the projector works so much. You're going to get a chance to see some projectors later. But what I'm talking about is the part that I play and the part that Managed Services plays within Christie. All the brilliance is up in Kitchener making the projectors and all that kind of good stuff. And all we do is take those projectors, install them, service them, monitor them, and make sure that they are operating. Not 24/7, but whenever they're showing shows. And what I was told we really wanted to talk about tonight was the transition from cinema to digital cinema, which is what we are directly involved in and how I initially got involved in this. I've been dealing in cinema now for about 6 years. Before that, I was a project manager for large structured cabling projects like hospitals and hotels and things like that, which led me into pre-show, DTDS, AMC type digital pre-show systems. I was involved in installing the networks, the projectors, the player systems, and making the whole system work. And that led me into meeting with Christie. And actually, it's kind of funny because my first 2 installs, one of them was right over here at Franklin Mills Mall about 6 years ago. And Matt was just a beginning CSE at the time, a customer service engineer. And I was a project manager for a company called ACS Data Line doing this install over here. So this is almost coming back to where I began in the business and kind of where you began in the business as well. So what we'll do is kind of take you through what you've heard. You've heard the big digital cinema transition is going on. We're going from film, the old film, which has always been what's in the theaters, and we're going to be transitioning to the DLP projectors or the digital projectors and those systems. So we have, and I'll go through that, converted most of the conversions that have been done by our company. Let's go on to this first film. I don't know how many of you have ever been in, you've all gone to the theater, I'm sure, but how many of you have been able to step back up in the booth, which you're going to get a chance to do here in a little while? Yes?
No, you're asking for a show.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, but this is what exists and has existed basically since the beginning of cinema. Of course, the projectors looked a little different, but what you'll see when you get up there is the big platter reels that hold the large films. And you'll see some of the tracks that go to get those films into the projector, and it just simply got a lighthouse and a projector and the audio, and it's playing a film like the stuff that we used in high school. Down below, there's an automation that ties into the lighting in the theater, and it ties into the sound system, of course, to bring the sound down into the theater itself. The automation does the lighting, it ties into the masking, and it ties into the fire alarm system. Are all of you familiar with the masking that happens in the theater? Just, we don't, we change formats from time to time, so a lot of times the masking moves, and that masking is controlled by this unit here. And when you're in there and seeing the house lights come up and down as the film begins and the film ends, that's all automated and should be happening on its own. Now, what we've had to do is take digital and replace these film systems. And we've done about 4,000 screens in our group so far. Go ahead to the next one. That's just a picture of, that's actually, I think, in a AMC. I think it's a strong projector, isn't it? The 2 primary film projector manufacturers are Christie and Strong. I don't know if any are familiar with them or not. Okay, go ahead. And when we go in and go to a digital cinema system, of course, we're going to change the projector. You're going to go from the film projector to a large DLP projector. And when it's a Christie, and I'll go through which types they have here in a little bit, but no longer, you won't need the film, you won't need the big spools, and the automation will have to be there, but you're going to have a player, and you're still going to have your audio system. So you see on the left, and I think that's what is that? What kind of projector is that? It's hard to tell. This is actually courtesy of DCIP. DCIP just kind of uses the generic type thing. But you see our automation is in our rack with our player. And we usually have a battery backup and a little control unit, and that's what controls all of the playback that's coming out. So you're actually having like an HD Blu-ray player with a DLP projector. It's just a lot bigger. These projectors typically run 600 pounds. The racks are like almost the normal size of the audio racks, which stand about 7 foot tall. So one of the challenges that we run into when we go to do installations is getting these big pieces of equipment into old buildings, which I'll show you some pictures of some of that happening later on. Go ahead. Main type of projectors, or companies that are producing projectors for this conversion, is Christie, which of course we're kind of partial to. Barco, which actually is absorbing a lot of the market. They've come in and really done good on pricing, and there it looks like some of the big guys are going to be going primarily Barco. NEC, which is getting a smaller market share, it looks like, and Sony, which is primarily courting AMC right now. Sony's are kind of large projectors, and they're also the 4K. So has anybody been fortunate enough to see a digital show anywhere? Okay. Have you seen a 2K compared to a 4K, or have you only seen, you've seen both? Did you have and what I want to do too is, if you want to ask questions while we have the slides up, go ahead and ask me the questions then. That way we won't have to bring the slides back up or whatever. Did you have an opinion on the difference in the 2K and the 4K?
I should mention that the Sony system is very different than what NEC, Barco, and Christie is.
Right.
They're all 3-chip DLP with an pass line integrated system, whereas Sony is using liquid crystalline silicon,
Right.
which they basically, from what I was told, ripped off from JDC. It's basically the same. They just copied it. It's vertically aligned liquid crystalline silicon, so it's an LCOS, which is a form of LCD with reflective light transmission properties, whereas DLP is 100% digital. It's pulse width modulated, switching mirrors. So the top three are using the same basic technology. Sony's using a different technology. But the only way that Sony implemented is 4K. They don't have a 2K version.
Now, what about from a perspective of the actual picture?
They both have their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I think that the 4K image, when you see it, if it's done correctly, is pretty spectacular. I mean, to me, it almost looks more like film. The 2K DLP stuff, though, are extremely bright, excellent black levels, very, very high contrast, which the LCOS sometimes is challenged to give you deep blacks.
Very good. All right.
4K is still being powered by the DBS server?
I don't believe we have the information on the servers. Somebody's been quite tight-lipped about the media player.
Well, I think the next one talks about the servers, and there is a Sony server. And that's maybe the Sony server that you're talking about? Which one is it?
Well, yes, it's an independent company that was working at first with Sony. I was just wondering whether they were still their supplier for their servers.
I don't know that much about Sony. We haven't. That's the only one that we have not been pulled into training and really working with. So I have limited knowledge about Sony itself. Of course, they wouldn't want to get us too tight or too close to them one way or another, especially at our level. Now, our engineers over here from Kitchener could probably tell you anything you wanted to know about that, so we'll just have to defer on that one. But we primarily install the Do-Re-Mi player under the Axis IT system, the IAX, and now they went, that company changed to Cinedigm or Cinedigm, something like that, just recently. So the systems that we install have a Do-Re-Mi player. Go to the next slide. A penny-wise automation, which here's, how do you back up? Can you back up? Yeah, back up. Okay, penny-wise automation, and we have our 2000S unit, which is the larger one for the larger screens, which is what we primarily put in the AIX installations. Then we have our ZX. Can you back up to where we can see the different ones? Okay. When I first started working with Christie, the only thing we were putting in was the 2000SB, or actually it wasn't that. It was an S, it was an H, that's just the pedestal designation. Then we came out with, well, the XB is always, that's one that's more mobile. That's for trade shows and stuff like that. The ZX we started putting in about a year and a half ago, and it takes screens up to 40 feet, I believe, and we'll do 3D up to 35 feet. And then the M is just, well, it was supposed to have been out a year ago. It's had some power issues, but they're going to actually, it should be ready. And at Show West, I don't know if any of you, do you go to Show East or Show West? It's kind of a trade show for the motion pictures. They'll be not so much introducing it as displaying it, and I'm not sure if it's totally ready. Jim, have you heard? Jim, is the M ready to go? Have you heard?
I was up at the factory 2 weeks ago. I saw them in production, but don't know.
Well, the wonderful thing about, as you know, if you go into theaters across the country, there's the big ones like this AMC one they're going to be going to, and then there's going to be the much smaller exhibitors. We converted Carmike completely, and we've converted a number of smaller ones. A lot of their screens are not that big, and a lot of their buildings can't even hold hardly the 2000 SB. The ZX is tight in there. The M has minimal requirements for extraction, and it can fill a screen up to, I believe, 35 foot as well. And it's lamp-wise, it's limited to what, 2K? Okay. And you can go up to 2K lamp in AM. A ZX will take all the way up to 3, and of course the SP takes 3. But the super bright gets high brightness out of a super bright 3,000 watt lamp. So. Barco we have trained on, my groups of installation people, and NEC, they're very similar. Like I say, they're all using the DLP technology, other than interface stuff for programming, setting the screen files or final projector setup. They're basically the same and operate very similar. Our extraction requirements are about 600 CFM for the SB. The ZX needs about 400 cubic foot per minute, and the M has no extraction requirements. So that makes it work a lot better in small theaters. And I'll show you a picture of some of the extraction that we've run into in our installations. Okay, you can go on beyond. All right. Now, you guys have probably seen the IMAX. They put a big push on, and they're going out with a lot of different theaters, and they're doing this dual. They said first they weren't going to go digital. Then they decided to go digital. And they started going digital, I think, a little over a year ago. I know AMC did about 100 screens. I'm not sure who else has put them in. And there is one over here, right, that we're going to see tonight.
Exact setup for this.
Right. If you could take the skin off of that, those are ZX projectors inside there. They just won't tell you that. That's one of those hidden trade secrets, right? Right. Now, the layout of an entire theater, I had talked about the booth layout, and when we initially came up with doing the installations, most everything we did was side by side. When I started putting them in, it's about 3.5 years ago, there wasn't enough content for digital to really hardly justify putting them in. So we were doing half of the theaters, and we were doing side by sides at all the theaters, which was a lot of extra work and a lot of extra expense. Carmack was the primary. They're one of the big 5, and I think actually they're number 3, right? Size-wise, I don't know anymore. Yeah. But they took on the digital conversion first. They went ahead and jumped in, got with AIX, and went ahead and converted their entire theater chain. They had to go in half and half for the first year until they could start getting content for all screens, content, everything that's released on digital. And now everything that is released comes out on DLP, so in 2K, so that's not an issue anymore. Now, when you have set up an entire theater, you do your player, your sound system, your automation, and your projector at the local site, but you tie into the network, and you have a library management server located centralized somewhere in the building that holds all of the content that is going to be played at that theater. What that library management server allows you to do is move a print of a film to any one of the servers at any one of the locations so that they can shift very easily from one place to another, or even multiples. Now, there is a key issue. They have to make sure they have the keys to play that on the specific dates. But you can move it around from your library management server, which makes it very flexible and controllable externally. Everything can be run from the library management server once everything is set up and operational at the screens. Whereas in the old film projectors, they'd have to take the film, put it on. If you've ever seen them do it, they actually have big rolls and big carts, and they'd actually take the physical film off of it, lay it on there, and have to drag it over and reel it up and go through the whole 9 yards to make it work. Also, if you think about the difference in bringing in that film, when the film's produced, it's had to be sent out in several crates, so the cartons aren't usually about that size, reassembled, all of the pre-show put on, all of the post-show advertising or whatever they have afterwards would have to be added to the film by one of the projectionists, and so they'd have to build the film once it got there. When it comes in like this, it comes in clips, just like your little digital player or a player on your computer. You have all of your pre-show clips, your whatever advertisement might be, Coke or whatever it is, and you just build a playlist, just exactly like you'd build a playlist in one of your players on your computers, and you can change it and move it, rearrange it any way you want at any one of the screens, anywhere. Did you have a question? Okay. So when we did the installations, we put in a 3-cable network that goes from the library management server to switches at the local, down at the projection booth area. And it has a management cable, which is simply for communications and monitoring. And then it has a a media cable, which is a Cat 6, and that's for moving the movies back and forth, or actually just one way because you just dump them once they get out there. And then it had a spare. Now, every piece of this equipment is monitored by our network operations center in Cypress, California, everything that we put in. We do the installation, we do the integration, which falls directly under me, and then we do knock monitoring, and we do service. So all of this equipment is left on 24 hours a day, so they know it's there. It's a safety issue. And they can also do upgrades from our knock to the existing installations, and they can check on what equipment's there, serial numbers of the equipment, verify things. They can download keys if necessary. So everything can be controlled out of our network operations center out in Cypress, California. It has to do with running a theater that's on an LMS. The two methods of delivery of the print right now, which is not really a print, you know, it's a digital film. They can either bring it in on a hard drive and download it to the library management server if they have one, or directly to the player, or they do have satellite systems that they're downloading by satellite directly to the library management server. And I'm not sure, do you have any idea how many of the Carmichaels are actually doing that now?
It's, from what I've been told, just a handful. They're still in touch.
It's not real fast, yeah. Carmichael Theaters.
It's a theater chain.
C-A-R-M-I-K.
Yeah, do they have some local here?
Reading, Pottstown. Actually, Reading was shut down. Pottstown.
How many gigs is the feature at 2K?
Roughly about 150 gig. I think the audio track's another 50 gig. So
It's not too long to download.
no, but via satellite, it's quite a long time. Yes, very.
Of course, there's real security issues too. They're very paranoid about people getting hold of these prints and being able to do anything with them. And so they're like, there's a lot of security around that. And the key pretty well takes care of that, because we have trouble with that all the time. We'll get out there, do an installation, need the content to bring that screen back up so they can get people in there to watch the shows, and we don't have a key that's functional. It has to have, they're serialized to the player, the projector head, it will not, and dated. And it has to know, everything has to be exactly right, in order, and in the right place, or it will not happen. Yes?
Is that just an access key, or is that an encryption key?
It's an encryption.
It's an encryption key, yeah.
And who makes that? Is that Christie delivering that to the new customers, or does the theater have to deal separately with each producing studio?
It's each of the studios, or each of the distribution, AIX or
There's a standard, digital cinema, the DCI standard spells all this out. You can Google it and print the whole thing out if you like, but it lays out all the specifications for the projectors, for encryption, decryption, storage, playback, everything. It's all in that document.
But each theater still has to call, Paramount and say, when am I getting this movie in, and,
Well,
nobody, we don't have to.
no. It's,
No, they still have, they used to have their film people that lined up when the films were coming in, what they were getting. And those people are now doing the keys and the digital piece.
So if you wanted to run the same movie on 4 different projectors, you'd actually need 4 copies, each with a different encryption key?
you need one copy and 4 different keys.
Yeah.
Oh, 4 different keys. Oh.
Yeah, and the key's not very big. Yeah.
You can put that one movie in every single screen in every house.
Oh,
No
okay,
one
so
will play
it's
it.
a multi-part encryption, okay.
Okay, go on to the next one. Just a library management server showing the media and the stuff. And what in there's a array of hard drives that I'm not sure how much storage we had in there, but it was enough to handle 20 screens worth of different pictures. I think 12 pictures or even more than that.
It was fairly large. I don't know the exact.
Whereas the players only hold what? Not that much. The Do-Re-Mi's were only 4 gig, 400 gig. So you can get more than 2 films on a player. And you can leave a player, another film on a player and just run the other one with a key and pick it up later. So there's some flexibility in there, but not a lot of space. And with the cost of storage now, it would seem like they just go ahead and get terabytes and everything and to heck with it, right? It'd be easier. Go ahead. It's just the topography of the network is just a star topography. And if you have to go beyond your normal, say you have a theater, which is huge. Most of the raves, someone was talking about a rave earlier. Rave has been converted. Carmike's been converted. We did both of those. Raves are beautiful theaters, but they're a nightmare for us as installers because they have these whole sections that are way down at the far end. So what we do is we have to go to one of the sound racks at one of the furthest booths and then take off there, run fiber, go on down to the next section to be able to make our network connection and make our downloads work and our management work. The most important thing is keeping the bandwidth for moving the movies around. They're just the switches and stuff in an LMS server. Go ahead. It just shows a standard side-by-side configuration that was set up when we originally started. What they had to do in most cases was go in because they had their main projection window, and a lot of times they'd have a small window on the side which you're seeing. That's for the projectionist to look out when he was doing whatever work he was doing. Sometimes they had for pre-show. And enough of you have been to the theater recently to see that they run ads before the shows. That's a whole pre-show deal that got me involved in it. Well, a lot of times they'll have a small pre-show projector and pre-show system that sets off in another window to the side. But oftentimes that window's only 12 by 12 or so. That's not big enough for one of our projectors. You know, we're minimum, in our site mod stuff, I think it's 18 by 18. And that if you're pushing into Real D and stuff like that, it's a little tight. So, but this would be how we would lay out a normal side-by-side setup. And here are a couple of side-by-sides. We ran into just enormous amounts of challenges during the installation phase. You can see the fact that these are way off of the floor over here. We had to get those projectors. This is a 600-pound projector that we had to bring up a line and set up in a side-by-side scenario. These were up in the Detroit area. And this is just another setup that shows where a side-by-side would sit next to a regular film projector. Now, everything that's happening now, they're going ahead and pulling them out completely. It's much less expensive. The site modifications will kill you when you have to go and dual up on your power, your windows, your extraction, your size of the area. It's very difficult.
Do these facilities have UPS? Or they just all run off of the grid?
Just run off the grid. Except for the player and stuff, everything in each rack, whether it be in the pedestal or in the rack itself, that does have a UPS. But the projectors themselves are not. This was called the Carmack Railroad. I don't know if you can see down here at the bottom, but instead of putting an additional port window in, which a lot of these theaters were concrete, what they did was they put this rail system, and we had to take the projector, regular projector, and put it on its own little tray, and we put ours on a little tray with rollers, a little car. And what they do is, if they were running digital instead of 35, they'd literally slide one out of the way and slide the other one in place. It was put in about 40-something theaters and gave up. It didn't. It was much more trouble than it was worth. And unfortunately, more digital prints became available, so that they were able to stop doing that. Yeah.
Do you have an estimate of how many theaters now are 100% digital and the film projector's gone altogether?
The number of, I can tell you there's about 4,000 screens, probably.
Yeah, screens,
Yeah. We put in about 4,000 screens. It's probably around 4,500 screens.
500 or so, which are just exclusively digital.
Now you're talking theaters or screens?
Screens.
Screen, yeah, that's screens. Now when it comes to, I think Carmack had probably 300 theaters. I bet there's maybe 320 theaters or so. There's not a whole lot that are full digital. Movico's got one that's all Sony. All new AMCs have been going in Sony, which they've probably done 6 that way. I'm trying to think who else is all digital right now. All the raves, which that's a number of, but that's part of our AIX rollout. There's some smaller chains that went along in the AIX rollout, but it's just a little over 4,000. So there's 35,000 roughly screens total in the United States that are going to be converted. You know, we've converted 4 of them, and it's kind of stopped, kind of like your digital TV thing. Is that going anywhere? What happened? You know, we expected to be far into it by now, but yeah, exactly. Where'd the money? Where did the money go? I mean, I'd rather hear about that. Anyway, so the Carmack Railroad. If somebody talks about putting something on tracks like that, say, you know, you might want to talk to somebody about that because it might not work too well. I'm sorry. I thought you raised your hand. Okay, go ahead. When we go in and start talking to a theater chain about what you have to do, we give them site mod specifications like distances and sizes and spaces, and you have to have these kind of power requirements, all this kind of stuff. And that gave us a lot of challenges because when we go into a theater with all of our equipment, we need everything done so that we can get those screens converted. The way we run our installation group is we work with the theater chain, get the site modifications and the network put in place. We integrate all the equipment in Cypress. The projectors come out of Kitchener, Ontario, and our installation crew all collide on a Friday afternoon, Friday morning, Friday afternoon, through that weekend, because theaters do not want to bring down screens during the weekend. That's their primary money time. If you go, you'll see tonight, if you ever go on Monday, there's nobody there. Friday night, you can't get in. So they don't like to be closed Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and they really would rather not be doing anything Sunday. So we go in, we prep the theater for actual installation, then Sunday morning early or late Sunday night, Monday morning early, one of the two, we begin pulling anywhere from 2 to 4 projectors out at a time, 35 millimeters, putting them off to the side, putting in the new projectors and start lining them up and getting them ready to go back online that night. And the only reason we don't hit online that night is if there was some kind of problem with the size of the lens, a lamp problem, or some kind of projector, or some kind of equipment problem. Now sometimes the keys don't get there, the keys don't work right, you know. There's a big, massive coordination when you're bringing in all that equipment with all the serial numbers that have to match. You have to get all that information back to the studios, and we actually do it through, in AIX's case, we would go to AIX. All the information for each screen with the serial numbers of all the player and the projector and all become what's known as a trusted device list. That trusted device list then becomes the Bible for them creating those keys that go out with the timed dates on them for play. They have a beginning date and time they can play, and they have an end date and time they can play on that specific player with that specific serial number. So you can imagine if you go out and one of your do-re-mis doesn't work, which we've had our fun with do-re-mis, you know, because everything's still in the beginning stages, and you have to start swapping those out. You have to then also swap out the entire information to the trusted device list, and you have to change your keys. So when you have an equipment problem, it has a lot to do with the being able to go live and go on screen, because you can't even get your content to play if you don't have everything set up right. This is some extraction we ran into. I don't know if you guys. Yes, I'm sorry.
I have a question for you. What are the power requirements for a typical system, and how do they compare to the existing equipment that's already there?
The CP, the 2000 SB, the big one, matched perfect. That was just a flop if you're doing a replacement. So it's a three-phase 220. Why don't you go ahead, Matt?
Yeah, the ZX has a few different requirements. I actually don't know what the specs are.
I don't know.
But it's
It's two-phase,
It's
220, yeah.
you have to have PU. But that was the only thing that was different. The larger of the two. Yeah,
But-
like you were saying, swap right in.
But I'm not sure about, now, did you go through you didn't go through the training for the Barco and the Sony? I know that's very similar, and I think is that 220?
Three-phase 220.
That's a three-phase 220. I think most of them are three-phase 220 except the ZX and the M. I'm not sure about their smaller units. So what we ran into when we went in with the ZX, all of a sudden we couldn't swap that power as easily as we could. We'd go in and an electrician would be there and he'd pull the power off the 35, we'd get it out of the way, we'd get back in place, he'd lay down the power into the new projector for us. When we got to the different, went to two-phase in the ZX, it wasn't going to happen that way. We recognized that up front, and we worked with the engineers in Kitchener. They developed a PDU that they could bring the three-phase in, it would convert it, give us our power in the pedestal and the correct power to the projector so that the actual flop could be made that way, and that way our installations wouldn't be slowed down by major electrical work on site. And it's less expensive that way too.
Why did they do something more than
Well,
we still got some of it downtown Philadelphia.
yeah, well the ZX, you're talking about why did they do that with the projector?
Yeah.
Well, the ZX actually can work either in Europe or in the United States, and I think that had a lot to do with it. And they didn't require as much power for the ZX, so they naturally toned down the power requirements for it.
I tell you, a whole lot of people in Philadelphia love to give it a two-phase.
Well, not in the theaters anyway. So we'll go in and we need 600 cubic foot CFM extraction, which is a fair amount. And we find this on top of the existing projector. That's a Kmart plastic fan duct taped on, blowing down into the. That won't work with ours. Ours will overheat and blow up. Plus, it was about 90 degrees in this particular booth. This was in Southern California.
Some time ago, but I did an install of it, Christie, and it didn't come with a blower. So I had to get a blower online just to add a little humor to the screw. I managed to find a blower online out of Canada. Somebody was selling blowers to cool off or ventilate hothouses that were growing marijuana. But it was a commercial blower intended for theater use. But you guys didn't supply a blower with the unit at the time.
Since I've been around, we don't supply it. You have to buy it as a separate unit.
The blower is separate.
That is absolutely separate.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. Yeah, extraction in most all theaters, well, 35 millimeters typically need that same level of extraction. You know, they usually run 400, 600. Sometimes they have to bring it up by adding boosters, you know, or changing the belt sometimes, or increasing the blowers on the roof that are sucking it out, doing extraction. But this didn't have any, so he had a long ways to go. You want to go to the next? Now, this is also the same theater. This is the kind of projectors that we're replacing. You know, that's probably been in there since SMPTE started, right? Is that one of your? It's amazing. Those are heavy too. I mean, we've had to get some serious movers in to get that stuff out. We did in fact, Matt was on that. There was what was the name of that place? That was an AIX theater. The Pavilion up in New York?
Brooklyn, New York, yeah. There's a cast iron base that's weighed 300, 400, 500 pounds.
There was not enough. Yeah, there was not enough room in the booth to have both projectors in there at the same time. So not only did we have to do all of that in one day, we had to get somebody there to move the stuff out and our stuff in, as well as do all the electrical work. The port glass, that's a trailer window there, and that doesn't do real good for reflection. Glass in a typical window is non-reflective, you know, because you're going to lose light going to the screen with it. Well, they did some innovative stuff to save money, but it gave us nightmares, to say the least. This particular one was put in Silsbee, Texas, and it was this is actually the first theater that Carmike ever owned. And so they still have it operating. And I went down to the grand opening, and I know the projector and the projection system cost more than the building. And it was amazing. And it was a single projector, you know, single screen theater down in Silsbee. Go on to the next one. Yeah, and that was their extraction. So that was a little better than the last one, but. And this was actually that other place. They didn't, you know, necessarily think about changing stuff. A lot of times they have suicide doors in the newer theaters, but in olden days the projectors were smaller, they were heavy, but a lot of times they actually built them into the building. So I'm only aware of a couple of walls we had to actually knock down, but boy, we bruised some people and some equipment.
I believe this site right here.
I don't know that we did it. I don't know if it was intentional or not, one way or another. So our guys get their exercise when they're out there doing the installs. Especially when you're going with new stuff, it always gives you nightmares. So our guys have been through several different, you know, projectors and actually the beginnings of those projectors and players, and they get a little frustrated sometimes. You can see Aaron. Aaron's a project manager for me now. And the other guy, he's still he's a supervisor now.
They don't look very happy.
They're not happy. And actually what they're doing is they're putting a wide angle lens on an existing installation, on an existing ZX, which was a lot of fun too. Go ahead. Okay, I'll show you how fast. No, you gotta go back. This is how fast we can do it. We've gotten so good. You gotta get your little hand down on there. There you go. Now do a double click. This is the removal of a 35. And this booth, that's how tight it was. I had to put my camera up on top of the sound booth, shooting with flash to get these pictures. That's why it's a little cramped. Now, you ever seen an electrician move like that? No, he wasn't union up there. I'd still be up there shooting. That's it. We're done. Problem was, I showed that to my boss, and we were doing really good, putting about $300 a month in. He said, "Well, gosh, you can do it." Yeah, no, it doesn't work that way, boss. Should have never done a time lapse of that. All right, this kind of and it cut it off again. No, there we go. Okay. This is the number of screens that have been converted through 08. Right now, we pretty well stopped. We haven't done full theater in a year. We were doing as many as 24, huh?
New car mics we are, but nothing.
Yeah.
A big rollout.
Yeah, but that's mainly almost transferring one way or another. So because of the financial thing going on. First, there was contractual things, getting the studios to sign on, getting everybody in line. There's DCI compliance, SMPTE, DCIP is the large group that's dealing with AMC, Regal, and Cinemark to form a large buying group so that they can buy, afford to buy this equipment to put this thing in. Everything is stalled basically at right a little over 4,500 screens. And we're hoping that any day now it'll break loose and we can get back to crazy work. We fortunately do digital signage work, we do digital menu board systems, we do lobby entertainment network systems and such for theaters. So we've been able to not only keep the maintenance network operations piece going, but a pretty steady installation of other alternative content type stuff. And we do all the pre-show systems like Screen Vision and DTDS as well.
Do you have any idea how many screens there are worldwide and also United States?
United States is about 35,000. Worldwide, I'm not sure of that number. Jim, any idea? Yeah.
There's a question I want to ask. I don't know if this is the right time or not, and it's not a technical question, and I'm not going to stick you to it anyway.
Good. Appreciate that.
One of the issues used to be with respect to doing sales and installation was that the Sherman Antitrust Act prohibited vertical integration in the business. That is, the people who owned the theaters couldn't also own all the production equipment and so forth and so on. So it basically separated it into two piles. The people who did the production, and of course nowadays when you do production, you can do digital production a lot cheaper than you can film. Mm-hmm. And then the people who have the theaters. And what this meant was that the production people would save money on their production, but the theater owners had to spend money to get the digital equipment to do the playback. So my question to you is, I see this is leveled out. I'm not sure what drives the business part of the industry, but the question is, has this basic conundrum of the producers saving the money and the theater owners having to spend the money, has that ever been integrated or ironed out, or in some way or another the business model answered? And is that what's causing your curve to start to level off?
Actually, that caused delays in that curve ever starting, and it hasn't, I don't think, fully been straightened out. What has been installed was done by a third-party group, the IMAX or Cinedigm, that operates on the virtual print fees for getting those in.
So it's a middleman,
yes,
so to speak, that it enables them to bridge the physical gap that I'm talking about, yeah, and marry the two systems together in the dollar cost sense, so that you can get installs done without breaking the backs of the theater owners, yeah, and at the same time having the producers share some of the expense. Is that it?
Yes, the theater owners do not pay for any of this equipment.
Okay.
The theater owners pay for site modifications.
But somehow you have to get around the Sherman Antitrust Act, which I think is still in existence.
Yes, yeah, I think it is too. So AIX, Cinedigm, DCIP.
You never noticed, huh?
Yeah. DCIP is going to be the group that does the virtual print fee and owns all the equipment for the big three. And the rest of the people are going under somebody like AIX and Cinedigm, or they can go independent, but it's almost impossible to do. So it's creating a real problem for small theater owners. They're really scared, they're not sure what's happening, they're not sure what's going to happen in their future, because this is an expensive and it's a big time game, and of course the big ones are going to go first. And that hasn't actually been true. The biggest ones didn't go first, but when the big ones go, everybody's going to have to tag along and join somewhere somehow.
Here's a question on cost. What's an installation cost?
About when I started, it was about $100,000 a screen. So a little 10-plex would be about $1 million. And I'm talking about all equipment, all installation costs, and including 10 years of service as well. When we sign up a chain, or when we install a projector, we sell 10 years of service, monitoring service after the sale.
Do you need to change the screen at all? Screen surface?
Not unless somebody puts gummy bears on it or something like that. No. But now, when you may be here thinking what you've heard about 3D. 3D has to go with the silver screen. So there are screens being changed out so that they can show 3D on it, because it activates on a silver type screen as opposed to a white screen. And you're going to see 3D, I think, over at the theater tonight.
Correct.
Yes, Jim, I'm sorry.
From the support side, I was under the impression that your group, don't you have to have a certain number of customer service engineers within a certain response time of any screen?
Yeah, I have a little map here in just a second.
Okay.
I'll get into monitoring and Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick, actually, I forgot my question.
That's right. Go ahead.
Yeah. Going back to the economics for a minute, who pays you when you do an installation? Is it the theater chain?
No.
Or is it the middleman?
The middleman.
It's the middleman.
Yep. When we do it with AMC or do it with Regal or something like that, it's going to come from DCIP. They're the ones with the money.
He charges the theater owner a virtual print
Virtual print fee.
to recover that investment that he's made in equipping the theater.
Correct.
And the Hollywood guys save money in two ways. They save money by not having to make real prints, which are expensive. And secondly, by making the masters digitally rather than on film.
Mhm.
So how do they get a free ride out of this? Or do
Well, they get the ticket sales. I mean, they're getting the ticket sales, and the virtual print fees is coming from them. That's where the VPFs come from.
So yes.
So yes. Yeah.
I do remember that question. I'm
So
sorry.
they sacrifice some of their ticket fee to allow the theater owner to pay the middleman the virtual print fee? So Hollywood gets less money from ticket sales than they would otherwise?
They're the ones paying the virtual print fee, correct?
Sorry, I was kind of doing
Yeah.
I missed that.
Isn't that right, Jim? I mean, the way I understand it is, yeah, the VPF comes from the actual studios, and that's where some of the problem has been, is ironing all that out.
That was the issue that I was trying
Right.
to describe, because when I was first involved, which is going back 10 years ago, this is a basic problem. You didn't have this virtual group in the middle, and there was no business solution at the time that could legally get around the Sherman antitrust, and I guess some bunch of lawyers got together and,
Lots of lawyers. I think
yeah, well, I mean,
we wouldn't need a stimulus plan if we had all the money probably spent on lawyers to try and figure this mess out right now.
it's the old Watergate thing, follow the money.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, the question was, you mentioned a 10-year service contract or whatever, service for that. How long do you expect the projectors to last, and do you replace them in their life?
Well, you're putting me on the spot, aren't you? No, won't replace them for life. The expected life is, they're looking at around 10 years. I don't know, I've heard, right now, they've been running, we've had projectors in running for over 3 years now. And actually some longer than that. But entire theaters have been in for over 3 years, going on to their fourth year. And
You have to remember, there's very little moving parts.
that's right,
Hard drives are going to go before anything else does.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it takes a
And lamps are changed, there's consumables, and yeah.
10 years would be beyond the technology life cycle, would it not?
I would think. But I haven't seen that. The only thing that's really developed since I've been involved in the last few years has been the smaller projectors that will put more light output with the lower lamps, and 3D's coming a long way. But as far as the projection stuff, nothing's really changed, the projection technology, other than Sony being different with their 4K.
How many hours do they get out of the lamps?
Those lamps, I think, are rated for around 1,500 hours. They try to run them up to around 3,000, but you got a lot of light loss. And service is the next piece that we talk about, because we have customer service engineers spread throughout the United States, and we don't have any service engineers in Canada, but we got service people out of Kitchener. But no big chains have gone completely and converted up in Canada yet. Our response time and ability to get the projector working again is crucial to the virtual print fee. You can't miss more than 2 shows and you'll lose the virtual print fee for that particular print on that particular theater. So keeping these things up and running is crucial. We have 150 people in our group manage services, and about 100 of them are in the service group, and about 84 to 87 of them are actual service engineers that live throughout the nation that are concentrated around the areas where the largest numbers of theaters that have the projectors are. And their response time is usually 4 hours at the maximum. We forward place parts so that we can get these things up and running again as soon as possible. Yeah.
This may seem like an obvious question. Are these all single lamp designs, or do they have a backup lamp?
Single lamp.
They're dual lamp?
Single
Oh,
lamp.
single lamp, okay.
No dual lamp.
Take a change a lamp out.
Physically, about 5 minutes. Making sure you have the right lamp there. Huh? It has to cool down. And you hope it doesn't explode, because there's going to be some critical damage done to the lamp housing. This is our new network operations center in Cypress. I don't know how many thousands, 30, 40,000 nodes that we monitor throughout the nation right now. Every switch, every projector, every server that we've installed, and that includes DTDS, digital menu board systems, pre-show systems of different types, is monitored proactively through this network operations center. They're looking for trouble calls, error messages. They should know when there's a problem with the projector before the people in the theater know. If they're calling us, we're running behind. We should know. We should have somebody on the phone to them, trying to get it fixed. Letting them know when their lamp hours are hitting the maximum. Keeping complete monitoring of the entire system that's going on throughout the nation, as well as upgrades. Like I say, key delivery. This is not at all involved in content delivery. Yes.
How many projectors are typical for a typical screen is now down to one?
Yes. The only time you'll see two is when they're doing dual 3D or IMAX. Otherwise, just one. Okay. I'm really not going to read through these because we've pretty well gone through that all. Let's see. Scroll down and we'll show where, this kind of shows you where our people are. And this is how I met Matt. He was a CSE, one of these customer service engineers up here in the Philly area a few years ago. Now he's a project manager for me. I think that's all, really. All right. I bored you, I kept you long enough, I'm sorry. Appreciate it.
It is angled. Okay, I couldn't tell from here.